Pardon me, sir, but what are you looking at?
We love you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different vitamins, just as much as we love you.
The ultimate comedian, the ultimate collection. Own them all.
Hey everyone. When some folks hear the name Pink Panther, they often think of the classic cartoon shorts. And why shouldn't? They're awesome! Said to be the last great Hollywood cartoon character, especially created during a time when big studios weren't making theatrical cartoon shorts, they very much dealt with the silent panther that went on a variety of unique and sometimes strange adventures. I loved watching these shorts as a kid, and they still hold up to me as an adult. I enjoyed how they told the story through no dialogue and just body language. On top of that, you had Henry Mancini's jazzy theme, which still has me humming it to this very day. The minute you hear those first notes, you can't help but bustle along at how catchy it is. The shorts were laid back, fun, and to this day they remind me of a simpler time when I was channel surfing through my TV, and sure enough would be delighted to see them playing these cartoons. No matter what show was playing on Nickelodeon at the time, the Pink Panther was always first on my radar. So imagine my surprise when I found out that what influenced these classic cartoons was a 1963 Diamond Heist comedy. And I was even more taken back by the fact that it didn't center around a cartoon animal. I was annoyed, but curious nonetheless. Jump ahead to my pre-teen years, actually rent the first movie from the library, and give it a shot. The response? Not so enthusiastic. Even if the movie's not centered on the cartoon Panther, the animated opening credit sequence is. They were created by an animation studio founded by Warner Brothers cartoon veterans David H. DePatie and Freleng. After working on some commercials and industrial films, they got their big break when director Blake Edwards commissioned them to do an animated title sequence with the titular character. This is probably the biggest highlight of the whole movie. It's just a feral panther running around, creating all sorts of mischief, and trying to get top billing. Even if the design of the character is still animalistic and feral, you still enjoy the playful hijinks that will later carry over to the animated shorts he would later star in. The whole thing plays like a neat little short before the movie. It's no wonder this sequence is so popular. Apparently, when the Pink Panther movie was being test screened, the projectionist was ordered to stop showing the movie because the audience was going ape over the title sequence. Even I admit, watching this movie for the first time, I couldn't help myself but rewind and watch this opening sequence again and again. I just couldn't believe how overly entertaining it was. If only it was similarly consistent with the rest of the movie. The plot centers on a rich playboy named Sir Charles Lytton, who is secretly a famous cat burglar named the Phantom, known for leaving behind a white glove as his calling card. He sets his sights on stealing the famous Pink Panther diamond, named as such for having a strange flaw where if one looked at it a certain way, they would see a discoloration that resembled a leaping panther. I guess the value of the Klopman diamond has nothing compared to that feature.
What are you going to do with the diamond, Garfield?
Nothing silly, something sensible and logical. I wonder how many burritos it would buy.
This pink gem happens to be in the possession of Princess Dalla, who goes on a holiday at a ski resort in Italy, to which the Phantom tries to take advantage in knowing where she keeps the diamond. At first, this sounds simple enough, and I would be fine with that. But from there, the plot gets complex and sloppy on its narrative focus. It's revealed there's an inspector who's trying to capture the Phantom, but he is unaware that his own wife is working for the thief. It also does not help she is vacationing at the same resort along with her inspector husband, who is oblivious to the whole affair. Then, the Phantom's nephew George gets in the mix by claiming he graduated college when he's really following his uncle's playboy lifestyle and trying to avoid gambling debts. It's all a ruse to get support from his uncle, but then later on, George learns his helpful family member is really the Phantom, and he decides to change career choices. It also doesn't help when he wants to go after the inspector's wife, which creates a whole barrel of shenanigans. And yes, that's Robert Wagner as the Phantom's nephew. Most folks might remember him better as number 2 from the Austin Powers movies.
You're $832 short, baby.
I had to buy the case.
Ah, so in essence, I'm buying the case. But what if I don't like the case?
It's a nice case.
No, it's a lovely case.
It's offending.
I like the case.
I'm still amazed at how much it juggles around so many characters and so many plot lines. And yet, there are things that get some setups that go without payoff. At one point, it's revealed Princess Dala exiled herself from her country to avoid the militant takeover. The new government declares the Pink Panther gem as property to the people, but Dala refuses to give it up.
It belongs to me. It was a gift from my late father. I shall never surrender it.
I kept thinking this would go somewhere, but it really doesn't. It only serves as a means for the princess to remain outside of her country, and to explain the valuable nature of the gem. Even then, I would have been fine without this context, given it doesn't go anywhere. David Niven is very charming as Sir Charles, and I do like the suave nature of his character. You can tell this is someone who enjoys living life on the edge, but in a cool way. I also weirdly enjoy the chemistry he has with the princess, played by Claudia Cardinal. It's played up to be cute, and you can tell they're not trying to cross certain boundaries. Especially when you consider the tiny uncomfortable factor, Claudia was in her mid-20s and Niven was in his 50s when they were making this movie. He's practically old enough to be her father. Yeah. But I will give credit where it's due. Their interactions are played up to feel innocent as opposed to romantic. There's a scene where Charles gets the princess drunk on champagne and decides to bring her to bed, resulting in this to happen the next morning.
Are you saying my virtue is not intact?
You know it is.
Then why should I feel guilty?
But after what I just said, a real woman would have slapped my face. I'm glad that's over. Friends again?
Friends.
Again, it's played in a manner that's more cute and charming, and it doesn't go too far. It's clear that Charles has his sights set on obtaining the Pink Panther gem out of her, and not going fourth base with her. Seriously, what was with this decade of movies that was so fascinated with the older generation interested in the youth? I'm looking at you, graduate. Although, the concept plotline of Charles and George trying to get some time with the inspector's wife Simone, played by Capucine, kinda drags the movie down. It does lead to some good comedic set pieces, but so much focus is placed on the constant hide here, no, hide there, oh no, my husband's coming back, quick, stuff yourself in the bathtub and I'll put bubbles under it. A little of that goes a long way, and even I admit, despite some of the clever setups, it goes on and on and on. There's good moments, but they get in the way of the main storyline. In fact, a good majority of our time is spent at this ski resort. While it is nicely photographed with wide shots of the slopes and some unique interiors of the place our characters stay at, it gets a little dull midway. It's hard to describe, but I admit, the sets look nice and good enough to play the movie off as some kind of travelogue, and I do like how the winter setting adds this charm to the place with frost on the windows and such. Yet, the comedic set pieces at the ski resort kinda drag on at times compared to the fast-paced nature of the later Pink Panther films. The movie even stops for a big musical number, which kinda goes on for a while. I don't hate the scene at all, given it's well staged and the song's alright. In fact, it kind of reminds me of Farewell, Follow Lee from Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Tonight we toast our happy host.
But the pace of this song is too slow, and it sags the movie down a bit. And yet, this is all in retrospect. I was about 11 or 10 when I first saw this movie, and found it rather dull, to be honest. And granted, there were some amusing things here and there, but whenever it cut back to the Phantom storyline, it just never caught my interest as much. But I will say, for the first time, I did sit down and rewatch this movie just for this video, and I will say the viewing experience was so much better this time. Being older than I am now and having a different mind state of movies in general, it did help quite a lot given so much stuff went over my head at that particular young age. But I still have similar complaints and sentiments. It does drag in a couple of spots, and the storyline with the Phantom I still find not really all that interesting, even though it is supposed to be the center of the movie. So if that's the case, why was the Pink Panther such a box office hit and a darling with moviegoers and critics at the time? Well, I thought about it for a little bit, and it all boils down to two things. One is the Inspector character. There is a reason I held off talking about him until now, because this is a major driving force that moviegoers feel owes to the movie's success. This is Inspector Jacques Clouseau, a man of the law who tries to be one step ahead, but his own oblivious and bumbling nature get the better of him.
You are my beloved.
Thank you.
That's all they had. We must find that woman. What was that? What'd you say?
This is a charming and entertaining character, but I don't think it's from how the character is written, but more from the performance. Because in different hands, this could have so easily backfired. Originally, Peter Ustinov was set to play Clouseau, but he backed out right before filming began, causing director Blake Edwards to scramble for a new actor. Enter Peter Sellers, and by Lord, he saves this movie. The line delivery, the slapstick, and there's just something balletic yet perfectly timed about the pratfalls and the way he bounces off the other characters. It's funny because the focus of the Pink Panther's plot was originally more on Sir Charles trying to steal the gem and dealing with his nephew. You still feel that here, but it gets easily upstaged by Sellers' scenes.
You are a constant and desirable contradiction.
Oh, I'm simply a woman in love, my darling.
In fact, if I recall correctly, a majority of this movie was retooled on the spot to fit Sellers' material. He literally steals the whole movie, and you can see why audiences enjoyed his portion of the feature more. However, this is not the same Clouseau one would see in later Pink Panther movies. Here, it's sort of a proto-Clouseau. The accent is not quite there, and even later movies would drop the wife character, like as if she never existed. For the most part, it's interesting to watch the genesis of the character and how he would later be reshaped as the sequels went on. Yet, some of the trademarks are still there, like mispronouncing words, having trouble getting out of his clothes, his ineptitude manner, and failed attempts to be romantic, even when it doesn't work. Now, do I think this is Peter Sellers' best performance? Not quite. If you want pure Peter Sellers, watch Dr. Strangelove or Being There. The fact he has to juggle around so many different personalities in one Kubrick movie, or trying to be charming for a character that knows little of the world, feels more interesting to look into. But yeah, I can't deny when Sellers knows how to make me laugh with a simple pratfall or verbal wordplay. It's not an annoying performance, and thank goodness, it avoids those pitfalls in becoming such. And the character alone is iconic enough to understand why Clouseau was endured after all these years. This leads into the other element that makes Pink Panther work, and that is the comedy. Even if the plot is too complex and maybe too sophisticated, there are some really good jokes here. It falls into the staging and the way some of these scenes are played out. I know I said it drags in places, and trust me, when you have things like Sir Charles trying to be suave and date the princess, it does slow the plot down.
I got friends in low places. You make one pass at me, and I'll sick him on you. Understand? If he moves a muscle.
But when he stages stuff like trying to rescue her prized dog just to win her heart, that leads to some really funny gags.
Look out!
What the hell? It's like something from a Wile E. Coyote cartoon. Or how about this scene when he tries to sneak out of the apartment so that way Clouseau doesn't capture him and falls into a mound of snow.
Good evening.
Just the fact he acts so suave and deadpan coming out of a giant wad of snow and ice cracks me up. Like, Yeah, this is a typical thing. Or how about this moment when he escapes the resort by posing as Clouseau? I know that's just silly, but that one small beat kills me. The fact he would go back just to get a slipper he lost slays me. And that's not to say there's no big comedic moments in the final third. There's a costume party scene where Clouseau uses it as a means to kidnap the Phantom. That goes about as well as you'd expect. There's a lot of mix-ups involving a gorilla costume, events that take a turn when the clumsy inspector sets off some fireworks, and it leads to a lot of strange and surreal gags that are so bizarre they must be seen to be believed and enjoyed. My personal favorite is when Sir Charles and his nephew try to escape Clouseau and crew, but they are still dressed in costume. A guy that we can only guess is drunk watches the strange events, and we are unsure if he's believing that he's hallucinating the whole thing, or just enjoying the weird spectacle. It's a shame, because I wish there were more moments like this in the first half to keep it energized. The scenes at the ski resort do have their moments, but not to this level of cartoonish quality. For the most part, the Pink Panther is not the strongest in the storytelling department. There is so much it has to juggle around, from diamond heists, to romancing foreign royalties, bumbling inspectors, to four-way affairs. What saves this entry from being the weakest is Peter Sellers in the comedic moments. Like I said before, a lot of stuff went over my head as a kid, and to see the context of those dialogue-heavy moments a little better now shows that my attention was more on the visual gags. If you just ignore the story, there is some good stuff. That is, if you can get through the slower spots of the movie. It's watchable at best, and clearly a feature that is more for the older audience. My verdict? Give the Pink Panther a rent. But have the original cartoons on standby if the experience gets boring. Despite my mixed feelings on this movie, I gotta admit, I still like the Pink Panther franchise overall. And if you want peer proof, that's not too hard to point out, as I welcome you to join me to my next video. Because trust me, the flick I plan to talk about next time is one you should see. Cut.
How did you ever manage it?
Well, you know, it wasn't easy.
In A Shot in the Dark, you'll meet Peter Sellers as that master sleuth, that peer among detectives, Inspector Clouseau. He gets to the bottom of things fast. Peter Sellers, Elkie Summer, A Shot in the Dark, Color Panavision.